I'm in the studio with Jay Halim.
And I'm in the studio with Jay Halim.
I am in the studio with Jay Halim.
I am in the studio with Jay Halim.
I'm in the studio with Jay Halim.
You are now in the studio with Jay Halim.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Jay Halim, and we are back for a super duper special episode. Super duper special episode of S.T.A.R.V.E Talk. Now, first of all, somebody's in here with me. And if you know me, you already know her. But, you know, since this started, we haven't had in-person interviews. And so why not start it special with this lovely young lady here? So as I say, if you know me, she needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce her anyway because that's just how we going to play this. So 6-time author, mama, grown ass woman, as she say, Southern girl, author, coach, book writing strategist, entrepreneur, and all that jazz, and happened to be my player partner. We affectionately call her Sister Sims around here, but her name is Tamika L. Sims. Please say the L. What up?
What's up? And you definitely have to say the L.
Listen,
Gotta say the L.
now we haven't been in this type of situation since about almost 5 years.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So 5 years ago, we linked up with an interview.
Yeah.
Well, series of emails and text messages and all that stuff, but then face-to-face an interview. Mm-hmm. And she's been around me ever since. And you guys see her with me. She's went from, just me being a client to working with me on pretty much everything that I do, to being a business partner of mine and just a partner overall. So now, she's coming up on a 1-year anniversary of her newest book, baby, which, I'm going to go out on a limb and say your best book, baby.
Definitely.
Let me show them
Definitely.
The Ink Pen Diva, truth behind my pen. So listen, right? Ink Pen Diva, I've always fell in love with the Ink Pen Diva from day one. I told her, she was like, I'm in the middle of rebranding, changing. I'm like, I like Ink Pen Diva. I don't like that other stuff. But for everybody else, where did Ink Pen Diva come from?
So that actually was a name that was given to me by one of my social media followers, like right when I first started my business back in 2013. And, of course, I had published my first book in 2011, and this person was like, how is the Ink Pen Diva today? And it just stuck. It just stuck. And I was just like, Ink Pen Diva, that is it. Because I was struggling actually with naming it until I got that, revelation just on a happenstance comment under a social media post that actually became the name of my business. And I think that I have grown into embodying what Ink Pen Diva really is.
So you were trying to change it and you did change it to get right with Tamika. Mm-hmm. What's different now, so many years later than what you was feeling like then? Why did you feel like you needed to get rid of it, and then now being able to come back full circle and it became the name of your book, and then now the world know you again as the Ink Pen Diva? What's changed?
So, initially, Jay, when I was thinking about changing the name, it was because I started to get an influx of male clients. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be helping men tell their stories, they're not going to want to be saying the Ink Pen Diva helped me. Like, it needed to be, I felt as though it needed to be something just a little bit more formal. But then you came along, you're like, nah, I don't like Get Right with Tamika. I like Ink Pen Diva. And so again, as I was just talking about when I came up with the name of the business, it's actually growing into and embracing what that name really means. Like, Ink Pen Diva is true to me because I've always had a love for writing. I've always had a love of words. Diva is because, your girl, like you said, a grown ass woman. So I've grown into, like embracing all of that as it pertains to who I am. And I bring that same level of energy to my business. And so it's like either, you're going to love me. Do you love me or do you love me not? Because I am who I am, and I am the Ink Pen Diva.
Well, let me tell you something. from what I see, you helped over 250 people
Yeah.
write and publish their books.
Yep.
That tells me somebody loves you. They loving the hell out of you. And then you've written 6 of your and you've written 6 of your own books.
Yeah.
And we're coming up on a year anniversary. What's different about this book as opposed to the other one? The process and everything.
The biggest thing about Ink Pen Diva, as opposed to all of my other books, is that this is the story that I didn't think I had.
Wow.
And what I mean by that is, you know, people knew me initially for talking about my experience of being in an abusive relationship. And then from there, I went into, you know, trying my hand at fiction, and I published a woman's anthology. And so all of those things, I became known in that space. But I never thought that I had another story to tell. I thought I was finished. And I really have to thank you for the encouragement to actually pushing me to say, no, you have another story to tell, because the story that had not been told was my business and entrepreneurship story. And so, and, you know, to be honest with those that's watching and listening to us right now, I didn't want to write this book because I was like, nah, I'm done. You know what I mean? I've helped so many people, and I put my career as an author on the back burner once I really fully devoted myself to coaching and really helping other people to tell their stories. And so that's really the difference, is embracing the fact that I wasn't finished writing. I wasn't finished telling my story in spite of all of the people that I had helped initially, and I could do both. And I didn't think that there was a realization in the past of where I could do both.
So, yeah, you know, I remember, I can tell you what I remember. I just, as a business person, I know, and being a business coach, one thing I never wanted to come to my clients with is not fresh business for myself. Mm-hmm. You know, like people, especially people look like you and me, are going to be like, so what are you doing? You tell me about my business. What you doing?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's a real thing. And a lot of times we live in this la-la land, but we got to actually be real. Like, people are going to try you and going to be like, hey, you know, okay, yeah, you wrote 5 books, but you wrote 5 books 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. What do you know about writing books now? What do you know about being published now? Mm-hmm. You know, you're trying to get me published. You're telling me what to do. And so the validity and the integrity of that portion of the business portion, I definitely wanted that for you, because I knew you knew what you were talking about. But I also know you had a story, you know, and by that time I was 3 books in. And I'm like, yeah, you got a lot to talk about. You know, as I'm understanding the nuances of publishing now, like, you got a lot to tell. So the process, once you finally said, yes, I'm going to go ahead and do it, like, what was that process like for you internally and externally?
I went kicking and screaming. No, you know, once I got started with it, I think I was still trying to tell the old story. Like, I was still trying to come into the space of, oh my gosh, I'm repeating some of the same things that people already have known about me. I just kept trying to pull in my past. And so that was the initial struggle, was, no, Tamika, you have to get out of that. There's something else different here where you don't have to utilize that. You don't need to do that anymore. And so that was the beginning part of it. And once I got into it, Jay, and started working on it and writing it and really digging deep into who I was and growing as a business owner, it was really difficult. And of course, you know, I was crying, like, y'all, snotting, crying, big crocodile tears crying, because I'm like, oh my God, but it was such a release for me to be able to do that. So my process was, you know, just as I tell my clients, is that you really have to lean into the emotion when you're actually putting pen to paper. You have to lean into the story that you're telling, so that what comes out at the end of it is the story that really needs to be told, because it wasn't about me. As far as writing the book, it was really for the women that's connected to me, the women that's going to follow me, who also have a desire to start their own business. So I wanted to make sure that I did a good job for them as well.
But also, what I learned, and I want you to talk about this, is that you had another testimony in this book. It's like you felt like your testimony of old was Trump, the one that you had to become an entrepreneur, because that was past. You was past that old testimony. Yeah. So talk about when you finally started digging into your outline and everything and putting this book out. like, get the book done. The testimonies that you had to talk about in here, because it was definitely enough.
Yeah, it was. And it was really interesting, though. Once I started peeling back the layers of my business experience, I was like, okay, girl, yeah. Because there were certain things that I forgot about, certain memories that I suppressed, right? Certain memories that I suppressed, things that I've never talked about publicly, I put in Ink Pen Diva. And so it was... But that was just the process of really helping me see that there is something more in you. And I think that that's a lesson for the people that's listening and watching, is that you have to remember that you're never just going to be one. Like, you're not just one part. We are multifaceted beings, and we have to know and understand that, especially as we grow throughout our lives. And so it's the same thing when it comes to our stories. You've already lived certain experiences. There's no need to, as my mama would say, reopen old wounds. You don't have to do that anymore. You can stay in the present with where you are and tell that story, and then realize that it's enough. Like, it doesn't have to be a trauma story. It doesn't have to be an abusive story. It doesn't have to be a painful story. What you have right now in the present, even when things are really, really good, is enough, because it still can encourage somebody.
So what sticks out to you the most when you talk about the testimony in this portion of your life, in Ink Pen Diva, Truth Behind My Pen?
I think it's recognizing that when it comes to business, that business is hard, and that there are certain challenges that's going to come along with that. But it's embracing that truth and embracing the growth that you experience as a business owner. And my business is books, so I'm around stories every single day. But it's also just that realization that, as a business owner, there was something for me to share, because I didn't always think that was the case. There was something for me to share as a business owner. And so I was able to do that with Ink Pen Diva. I was able to be vulnerable, right? I had to I had to dig deep. I had to dig deep, but I was able to be vulnerable. I was able to be honest, and every tear that I felt, every smile that I felt, all of that, I was able to put on the pages and leave it there.
Listen, go get that book right now, inkpendiva.com. Go on there to the website and get the book. So I want you to go deep now. Mm-hmm. Which one stuck out to you the most? Like, what's because I don't want to tell the story, but like, at what point between the timeline, was like, I'll give you a better question. What was it that you thought you would never say publicly that you put in the book?
Oh, that's such a great question. What would I never say publicly? The biggest story was going through an ectopic pregnancy at the beginning of my business. That was something that I never spoke about publicly. People never knew that I had to have, because as a result of that, you have to have emergency surgery, and I was out of commission for weeks. And so that was something that I never wanted to talk about, never wanted to acknowledge, because I was still dealing with my own womanhood at that time, in my own femininity. And so, but that's also happening right after I launched Ink Pen Diva. So I have clients, I have a business now, I'm up and running. I was also working a side hustle at the time. I had a full-time job. And so, but I was also going through that. So, and that was the other thing too, Jay, is that I realized that, when I was building my business, I was still very actively living life. And there were things that were happening behind the scenes that people had no knowledge of.
Yeah, that's also traumatic too.
It is.
So trauma got different faces. And so you in a situation like that, and again, not trying to tell the book, but you're dealing with it for the most part alone. Mm-hmm. So, and then you're trying to deal with a business which can change your life and turn your life upside down. And then you're dealing with other individual stories, which you're going through those roller coasters. Exactly. Because everybody's not coming in with a good story. Everybody got their trauma story. Yes. Everybody want to write a book. When they want to talk about their trauma, when they came out of trauma. Like I want the happiest person in the world to write a book about being happy. You know what I'm saying?
I would love that.
But that's not usually what you get, right? No. It's always somebody got knocked upside the head. Yes. Somebody got this happen to them.
Yeah.
Somebody abandoned them. Raped them, did this, and you got to take all that in, because you're helping them, but did you ever feel like I got something to say, and who's going to listen to me? Or did you feel like nobody wanted to listen to you?
I didn't think that people wanted to know me for anything else. And that's just such a hard, even to say that now, that's just a hard thing, is that I didn't think that people knew me for being a domestic violence survivor. Like, that was a connection point. because a lot of people, because I didn't see being a survivor as a prized possession. I didn't see that as the badge of honor that I've come to realize that it is now. And so that was our connection. I was the girl who gave the face to being a survivor, and that was it.
Yeah.
And that's what people wanted, and that's what they wanted to know. At least that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Or that's what they wanted from me. And so that was also the energy that I was projecting. Even when I didn't talk as much about being a survivor, I didn't really do a good job of promoting me having a business either. I was just very fortunate that I did a really good job, and my clients were, and they still are, like a number one referral source for me because of the work that I did with them. So, it's just, again, just that whole, the truth is where I stick with when it comes to that book, is the truth. The truth is that I had another story to tell. The truth is that we all have more than one story to tell. It's just whether or not we're willing to put ourselves in position to do it.
Yeah, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that when we get to this space, especially when we just talk about domestic violence, we both have experience in that. You know, you being a survivor, me creating a documentary of it. I think I start to find people live in that space. You know what I'm saying? It's like, all right, I'm here, and they just get comfortable in that. And I think with trauma, period, like people find their space, to get comfortable at. They get their futon couch, and they just lay there. You know what I'm saying?
They do.
And I think you were having a lot of issues because you were trying to navigate away from it. People were trying to keep you in it. And I think that you should be in some space, especially when it's time to step into that space to help out other women or people, period, because we learned that it's not just women. Oh, yeah. But trying to go away from the comfort zone, of that space. Do you think that was very tough for you, and you think that that's where other women are finding themselves, having a hard time trying to get out of that comfort zone?
Absolutely, because you wrap yourself in the blanket of trauma, right? You wrap yourself in the blanket of it. Like you said, you do come comfortable. You do make your bed in it. It's the devil, Yeah. I know every single day I knew what my life was going to be like when I was very actively coming out of that relationship. I knew that I was going to cry. I knew that I was going to be afraid. And I grew comfortable in that. Anytime, and even before I started writing a book, before I started launching a business, anytime I was trying to pull out of that, that little blanket would pull me right back in, and there I went hiding under the covers once again. And so I do think that people, they get comfortable in their pain, they get comfortable in their trauma, they get comfortable in their issues, and it becomes their safe house. And so anytime you try to pull them out of it to say, hey, there is more in this life for you, there's more that you have to offer, I see more for you than you see for yourself. And even in those moments, they're still like, nah, I hear you, but I'm going to go back to here because this is where I'm comfortable at. And that's a sad state of affairs. And having had my own experience with it, I know firsthand how that feels, but I also know how it feels to be like on the other side. And I know what it's like when you come out of it fully and you become this brand new woman or this brand new man, for my fellas that's listening. You become this brand new person and you're like, man, this is what was waiting on me. And I was still trying to stay stuck here. Like, it's crazy. But, we all have to have our awakening moments where we see that, gosh, life is so much sweeter on the other side.
The funny thing, like, again, your story, and again, not giving it away, but you were working with domestic violence. I mean, survivors. Like, this is your full-time job at one point. Like, do you feel like that was a mistake? Or do you feel like that was what you needed at the time? Because, I mean that because, again, same with the books. Yeah. You left the trauma. Now, every woman that's coming in there,
right,
they got just as bad as you or worse stories as you, and then you have to internalize that and take that in. Do you feel like that was a mistake, or you feel like it was something that helped you?
Gosh, probably neither of those things. I felt as though it just shined the light on the fact that I was living a lie. It was very difficult for me to advocate on behalf of battered women and their children and not see that I too was that. Yeah. And so I'm out in the community because I did community education and outreach. I'm out I'm sharing the stories that I hear. I see the women coming into the shelters and their children and how broken and beat down they look. And then I go home and it's the exact same thing for me. But I'm like, well, I haven't been punched in the face yet.
Yeah.
well, he hasn't taken all of my money yet. And you start to rationalize that, oh, it's not as bad. Really isn't that. And at one moment, you do have to wake up when it does get that bad, and you say, wow, I'm advocating when I should have been being advocated for.
Yeah.
And so it was a very tough time. But again, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that I had the experience, believe it or not, because I think it just helped shape me into the woman that I am today.
So, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship. You're the ink pen diva.
Yeah.
You're working a job, not that job, but you had another job at this point. Taking it up another notch, something that people probably would still be at right now.
Yeah.
Because it could be a career job, but you got tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, look, it's not for you.
Yeah.
You choose to say, hey, I'm going into this entrepreneurship full time. What was the transition like?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. Because Jay, once business took off for me, business really took off for me. It's like people were like, oh wow, there's somebody out there that can help me write a book that's not connected to education. Yes. And that's how I felt, because it was a wide open market. It was a wide open lane for me. And I just think that the stars aligned, and it was perfect timing for me to become who I was. And so business was booming. I had all the clients. It got to the point of where I no longer needed my work paycheck. I could save it. And that led the way, and I didn't realize that I was doing it at the time, but I started building up that nest egg, that the people at the time were telling me, hey, you need to have savings because you need to be able to take care of yourself. Like, you're just starting out. You don't know. You don't have your paycheck anymore to kind of undergird any sort of unexpected expenses. So, but then 2016, September 2016 was that moment for me where I really went to God and I prayed and I said, something has got to give, because I found myself, and hopefully my old boss isn't hearing this, but I found myself working more for my business on my job than I was on my job.
That's everybody.
You know what I mean? So, I was taking client calls, like I was really being reckless. And so I just had to say to myself, you know what? I just went and I prayed and I said, is this the moment for me?
Yeah.
Is this the time for me to really step out of and step away from the job and really see if I can do this full time? And it took me 6 months.
Yeah.
6 months of continual saving, 6 months of continual building. March the 1st, I even remember, where I was when I wrote that resignation letter. But March the 1st, I walked into my boss's office during our normal, monthly, weekly meeting on a Monday, handed her my resignation. March 31st was my last day as an employee. April 1st, 2017, I stepped into full-time entrepreneurship. On April Fool's Day, can you believe that?
That's funny. That's funny. I didn't even think about that. That's funny.
Yes.
Hey, listen, so, it's funny because it seemed like you did everything right.
Yeah.
It seemed like you did everything right. But wait, there's more, right?
Always. Yeah.
So it slowed down for you. Now tell us about the slowdown.
When I started, I had the plan, Jay. I had the whiteboard. I had everything. I had the clients. I had the workflow. I had the money coming in. I was good. But then those clients finished their books.
Oh, man.
And then it felt like I was pulling teeth, trying to get more clients to really sort of sustain me going into the very next year. But with the slowing down of clients came the slowing down of revenue. There was no more job paycheck. And so 2018, not even a year later, here I am homeless.
This is the part about business that people don't talk about.
Right.
You can find 100 people on social media right now,
Yeah.
and they're all talking about how, you want to make 6 figures in 6 months. You want to make 6 figures in 3 days. I did this. I just started in a short amount of time. I could do this, like the whole sales pitch. But more often than not, the story sounds like this. Mm-hmm. The story sounds like this. It's like, and again, I go back to saying, it seems like you did everything right.
Yeah.
You prayed,
Yep.
first thing, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You had a plan. You had your whiteboard. You were saving money. You had money in the bank.
Yes.
You had all this stuff.
Yes.
You set a date, like everybody say. You say you want to do this, buy when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You did it. And that still didn't work and prevent you from being homeless.
No.
Did you want to give up the business at that time, or what was your thoughts?
I did not. And
no, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I did not.
That deserves to be no, because at the end of the day, some people would have been like, "Hey, I'm done."
And you know what, Jay? Because when I started Ink Pen Diva, a few months later, my dad passed away. So I'm dealing with that. I told you about the egg topic. I'm dealing with that. And then now here I am again. I'm like, and I should have, right? My mental faculty should have came to me and said, Tamika, maybe now is not the time. Maybe you need to pause. Maybe go back to work for a little while. But I was determined to make entrepreneurship work. And I just saw it as a bad time. And I didn't understand that business had cycles. Like, you helped me to understand that so many years later. But I didn't understand that business had cycles. And I didn't understand that there were going to be those moments. I was like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. I was on my ass, but I can do this.
Yeah. No,
I didn't know where the next dollar was coming from, Jay, but I'm like, I can do this.
Yeah. What about support? What about the support system? What does the support system look like?
I didn't have much of a support system. I had my family. They were there for me, but they couldn't help me. There were no other entrepreneurs in my family. None of my friends were entrepreneurs. The coaches that I was working with at the time, they were all gone, just gone. And so it was me. And so I was left to really sort of figure this out on my own. And what's crazy is I was okay with that space because I had been in that space before of having to figure something out on my own. But it never dawned on me that you could make this easier for yourself if you would just go back and get a job.
Yeah.
So now that's my advice to people when it comes to business, because if it gets hard and you are like, don't wait until you get to the bottom like I was to try to figure it out, and even then not make the right decision. If you find yourself falling on hard times, or if the writing is on the wall, as they say, do yourself a favor and go get a job. Like, it doesn't have to be that hard.
And she's not saying quit your business and get a job. She's saying get a way to sustain yourself income-wise while you build your business. Yeah. And that's totally fine. Yeah. Individuals really have done a number on people's mindset to make the job look like it's the devil. And this is a 20-year entrepreneur saying it's like, and I haven't had a job in a long time, right? So it's not about that. It's just like we always want to force testimonies when we don't have to, and we've also put ourselves in a situation where we feel like just enough is enough. Right. We plan for just enough. I only need $3,000 for this, for my month's expenses, my house, my car. But if I make $3,500, that's enough. Yeah. No, that's not enough. You need way more than enough to be enough. So 2 years of inflation without any income increase, now you're under, with that amount of money, right? So rent goes up, expenses goes up. Again, I said this on the video we did, $10 for eggs. Nobody expected to pay $10 for eggs. Gas went from 2 something to 4 something. Like, those expenses change rapidly. And so if you're not, if you don't have, you left your job because you had enough, right? Yeah. Not because you had more than enough, right? Because you had enough. Mm-hmm. And so you had enough for that time. You didn't have enough for what could possibly happen going forward. Exactly. So you're homeless at this point. Yeah. Trying to figure it out, not giving up the business. Right. You decided that you were going to stay. Mm-hmm. You were going to push it through. What were those calls like? What was the business going? What was going on with the business at that time?
So, as I went towards the end of 2018, I started getting calls again. I started getting clients reaching out to me again. And, because the thing is, Jay, even though homeless, I would still find a way to do a client call. I found a way to get internet, to do, what I need to do from working on manuscript perspective. Like, I just figured it out. I found a way. And so that kept me somewhat in front of the people where they thought, on the outside looking in, you would have thought, oh, Tamika never missed a step. I was leading a women's empowerment movement at this time, Self-Assured Woman. So I'm facilitating telesummits and workshops. I had just did a workshop. I had just did my first live women's empowerment event, and I left that event with having no place to stay because I'd saved up. I had sponsors for my conference. I had women flying in from different parts of the country to come to this event. But here I am, then they're going back to their prospective homes and their prospective businesses, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So it was tough, but so you're seeing all that, you're like, oh man, Tamika was on top of the world, and people would say that, oh girl, God has so much store in you, but I'm like, I don't know where I'm gonna live.
See, but you thought you didn't have something to talk about,
right?
Hello, you thought you didn't
right.
have anything to say.
I know.
Like this business is being built on the back of a woman who don't have a place to stay.
Yeah.
Again, cheating a little bit because I know, and it got to a point you didn't have transportation.
Yep.
So no internet. Well, you find the internet wherever, hot spots, whatever the case may be. Walking.
Yep.
But you're still running the business. At what time was the point where you started saying, I got to do this differently?
It was headed into towards the end of 2018, headed into 2019. I just had this really tough conversation with myself, and I said, I cannot live this way anymore. Like I didn't feel as though I was faking it, but I knew that that's what I was doing. Because I would try to find a way to do live streams. I mean, I tried not to let anything stop because I would be concerned about how it would look.
Wow, there you go. There you go.
How would it look to the women I had over 1,500 women that were in my movement at this time, women that depended on me to be who I was, to be the leader, right? To be the woman that they could come to for support. And I'm like, if I let them know what's going on, I knew I would lose my movement. Because then what do they have to aspire to if I failed within a year, if I'm struggling to do to this point, and reaching the point of where we went from virtual to live in person, that is a big deal for people that was building virtual communities. And I was able to do that. And I was like, what would they think about me? What would they say about me? How would they receive me, if they would anymore? So I kept up appearances to make it look good. And
that sucks, man.
Yeah.
That sucks because, and I pulled up my calculator and do my little math real fast. This is where the scary part at. And if y'all want to learn something about business, and you got to be honest, this is the real truth about this situation. She had 1,500 people in her group. But if these 1,500 people would have gave her $100 for her product, her service or product, she'd had 150 grand. That would have probably paid for 3 years of living in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah.
So we have to start being honest with ourselves. Like, we be putting it, as an entrepreneurs, we put on for the people because entrepreneurship is selfless, and we want to help out everybody, and we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. But if these people try, like I said $100. If they just gave up $50, that'd have been $75,000. If they gave up $25, you know what I'm saying? Now you in the 30-something range, but that still would have had you into an apartment. You know what I'm saying? And not on the street, right? Not staying in different places trying to figure out what you're going to do. Like, so is that really your group or is it not? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because we have that situation on social media where it's like, oh, I got 5,000 followers. I can't show up on social media not looking like I'm supposed to be looking. It's like, they don't check for me.
Right.
They're really not talking to me. They're not following what I'm doing. And so we have to actually not lose sight of what's actually happening in our lives.
Right.
And so we can actually make the proper moves for ourselves.
Yeah, and that's such an important point to make, Jay, because I, even now, and I've been doing ink pen, been in business for 10 years this year. And so I see the difference of entrepreneurship and how it looks. Like, nobody, you would never know that people were struggling, homeless, living out of their cars, scraping up money for gas and using coins. People would now that everybody's on a private jet, now everybody's flying across the world, now everybody's on all of these multiple stages. And let me tell y'all something, that is not real life. Now, I'm not saying it's not real for everyone, but it's definitely not real for the majority.
Not even a little bit.
And that's what we see. That's what we see. That's why, because, 10 years ago, entrepreneurship wasn't a wave.
Yeah, well, 20 years, 15 years, definitely.
But for you,
Yeah, but now 10 years ago, it was starting to change a little bit. But now, these last 5 years has been ridiculous. Like,
everybody.
Like, leave your job. Don't go to work. You can do it yourself. And I get it for the hourly wagers.
Yeah.
you have these side hustles that you can kind of replace that. But the difference is if you're an hourly wager and if you're not a self-starter, then you need to stay there.
Yep.
Because being an Uber driver, going through all this, you still have to be a self-starter. There's some hustle about you in order to make more money. Yes, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. You can't leave on the possibility all the time. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I definitely can make more money. Are you going to put in the work? Are you going to sit in traffic all that time to do that? Are you going to go ahead and do DoorDash? Are you going to go to people? Like, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. And that stuff requires work. It's definitely work. It's not, no less work than what you do at the job. Right. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a big lie. So, you going into 19.
Yeah. 19, my life changed.
I'll let you tell. Go ahead.
In 19, my life changed. So of course I'm in Columbia, right? I was finally able to get back on my feet, and so now I'm in an apartment, not in the best of neighborhoods, but it's my apartment. I'm bouncing back, right? Your girl is coming back. That's what I said. I'm coming back, right? And I was able to do it as a business owner, still with no job, so I had enough money to do what I needed to do to get in there and do all the things. And there was someone that I knew that said, I know somebody that wants to write a book. And I said, okay, who is it? So she told me about the gentleman who evidently I had already been connected to on Facebook for years and had never had an opportunity to meet in person.
You want to tell them why? What happened?
With the Facebook?
No. So I'll tell it.
Okay, you tell it.
We got connected because I was doing that documentary I talked about 4 years prior.
Goodness.
And some of the people that was working with me on the project said, "Oh, I got the perfect person," and they reached out to her, and she was like, "Nah, she ain't gonna be bothered." So she respectfully declined the opportunity to be on Unbeatable. Domestic violence don't win.
In that case.
So that's how we found out. That's how we got connected on social media.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that I don't know what happened, you guys. So. Yes. So anyway, but so then, later on, I guess it was later on, I don't know how much time had passed between that, about a month.
Going into 2018, coming out of 2018, going into 2019, it's about a month.
Now, this is the irony of it all, you guys, because, once I see it, and I'm like, oh, there's an interviewing platform here. Oh, I have a book. I have a business. I was doing some different things at the time, working in music. And I'm like, oh, let me, pitch myself. Okay, pitch myself okay. So I'm like, let me pitch myself to be on the show. So immediately I got a response back. The studios and the platform, the studios there in Columbia, so I could go to the studio and actually do the interview in person. I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off the day of the interview, and lo and behold, it is Mr. Washington. Lo and behold, it is Jay Halim. And I'm like, okay. And so from that moment, from our first conversation, my life just completely turned around. And so
found somebody to beat up on?
I found somebody to beat up on. And that was our first interaction, was an interview, a sit down interview like this discussion. And it was just an amazing conversation. It was an amazing conversation.
She said that's my best interview I ever
say
did.
It's his best interview. I'm going to go on record so y'all can hear me on S.T.A.R.V.E Talk platform now that was his best interview. Because we were just able to connect not just about books and stories, but also music. Yeah. That was a lifelong passion for the both of us. And so that was, and it's like, wow, there's another person here that can talk the language that I can talk. And you know what I mean? And we can bounce off and talk about the music scene and the industry. Jay from the New York area, I'm South Carolina, but we were both kind of managing artists and doing all the things. So, wow. And then it's like, yeah, after that, it's like, yeah, I want to write a book.
Yeah, well, we was like, well, let's get to the book, because that was the initial somewhat supposedly introduction. But like, yeah, so ain't you the one with the book that help for people write books?
Yeah.
But I'll say, about 10 minutes of talking outside of what's name, I said, you need to come work with me. Forget the book. Because I didn't care nothing about writing the book.
He didn't care nothing about the book.
It was just me speaking. And everybody's like, hey, since you speaking, you're talking, doing these talks. Mm-hmm. need to have a book. I didn't, it's usually, I went out of order like I do a lot of things, so if you're supposed to, write this book, everybody's supposed to like the book, then you're supposed to speak and talk about it. Right. I went the completely opposite direction, and so I was already speaking, I already had a platform, I already had merchandise, I already had all of that stuff. I just didn't have a book, so I'm like, hey, we can do it, but I think you'll be better off doing this with me. And so she was like, no, we're gonna do this book, and I just remember her, just telling me like, no, you're gonna do it, you need to do it, all that other stuff like that. Yeah. But the part that stands out to me, especially for this conversation here, is that the vulnerability. Because, well, first, when you told me, how much the price was, and we had a conversation, I was like, nah, you got to charge a little bit more than that. But then, when we had our first missed meeting, Starbucks meeting. Yeah. That always stands out to me, because I'm like, okay, so now what? He was like, well, I can come by your office later, or you can stop by the house. Mm-hmm. What was that like? Because you didn't know me like that. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it was going to be a real vulnerable moment, because now somebody's coming to your house, right, and seeing you,
I was actually living. Yeah. It was, because, I still didn't have a car. Yeah. And I didn't even have a car. I had to get a ride to do our interview. And so, and when stars didn't align for me to actually meet you like we had planned to at Starbucks, I felt as though I had no choice, and I felt comfortable enough with you to say, this is okay. But then also in the back of my mind, I'm like, I didn't have a kitchen table for us to sit at. And so I had to create a table for us to sit and to actually have the meeting and the conversation. And I didn't have cable. I didn't have internet. So I was literally bringing you into my space and I was completely, it was open. And I knew that you would see me for who I really was. But I also didn't think that you would lose the respect for me of my gift and what I could do, how I could help you really tell your story or bring your story to life. And so it was a tough decision, spur of the moment, but I made it, I think, with the hopes that this wouldn't change how you saw me, even though I was bringing you into my space. And so that was tough, because I'd never done that before. Yeah. And I would have never done that had I not said, you know what, here I am, I got a job to do. If we're going to get this done, this is how it has to be, and it is what it is. And so, and I think that helped me to realize that it was okay for me to accept my truth. And, I don't know, it was just, things just aligned, and I just think that you just happened to be the person that I made that decision with. So I don't know, even from your perspective, how it was, because I was a woman, you know what I'm saying?
I can tell you. I mean, the initial situation wasn't no thing, because I come from that, and so I wasn't tripping. But moving forward, it was a life-changing situation for me, because I got a chance to finally reciprocate, or not so much reciprocate, but give somebody something that I always prayed for. I wanted people to see me, because I spent so much of my time being vulnerable and being burnt because I was vulnerable. You know what I'm saying? Like I've made TikTok videos, whole YouTube, maybe 30, 40-minute videos. I've cussed people out. I've talked to my coaches that I've had, like, vulnerability don't live here no more for me, because vulnerability never worked for me. But I was happy to be in a space to not shit on somebody else who was vulnerable to me. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And give them what I never got. I've never gotten, I'll say, like, okay, I was vulnerable in a space and somebody probably said, okay, here, and then move on. Like, but like you said, the respect wasn't there. We probably not having conversing anymore. We're not friends. We're not that. All right, I saw you in this space. I showed love and kept it moving. Yeah. Like, no. I saw you in that space, and I'm like, I'm not going to, I couldn't do nothing the first time, because, again, we still was getting to know each other. But I'm like, okay, it didn't affect how we did the work while we were there. It didn't affect how you communicated with me. It didn't
Right.
affect anything that we were doing at the time. So I'm like, it's no need for me to make her suffer
Right.
for that. But then it drew me nearer saying, you know what? I gotta, you know what I'm saying? We gonna make this work because again, I never had that. Every time when I finally decided to go vulnerable in my life, everybody went the opposite way on me or mistreated me. So I knew I couldn't do that to you or nobody, but it was just you at that time.
Yeah.
So
And I appreciate that because, you know, that was about like, and I was still using the phone for internet purposes.
yeah, I remember
You know
that
what I
phone.
mean?
It was
And,
broken.
The phone was broke, the computer was broken, but oh man, I was doing it though. I was doing it. And so, you know, I just was, you know, and so again, I just think, of course, I've thanked you over the years that since we've known each other, but definitely thanking you on this platform for treating me with respect, not looking down on me, because you could have easily walked in, you know, a business owner of your caliber, a man of your caliber could have easily walked in and turned right back around out of the door, and the whole thing would have been gone away because of, you know, just what it looked like really behind the scenes and me pulling behind the veil and allowing you to come into. You could have easily done that, you know, if you were not the person that you were, and if you didn't, I guess, see something in me or whatever that was. See
I
something
just
in me
been
to keep
there.
it on. Yeah.
I just been there. I told you story. You remember real fast. I remember, you know, I'm coming up taking photos and doing video, and I'm working for $8 an hour cleaning up a hotel, and a lady paid for me to come to Atlanta to shoot with her and set me up in a hotel, did all that other stuff. And the very next week, she came and walked into the Hampton Inn and saw me with a mop in my hand, mopping the floor. And she looked like I stole money from her. Because I know if she'd have known that I did that, and she never asked me, but I just know in my heart, if she'd have known that that's what I did full time at that particular time, she would have never gave me that money that she gave me. She never would have gave me the opportunity. And that felt bad. Even though there was no words exchanged in that manner, it was, hey. And she said, oh, you work here? And you could just see
it,
the disgust in her face, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I didn't do a bad job for you. I performed at a high level for you. Like, why should I be looked upon, even if that's just my side? You don't know what I'm doing. I could have had 3 jobs.
Exactly.
But that it wasn't look like that. Nobody wasn't looking at it like that. So I just like how people did me, I would never do that to nobody else.
Yeah. And that's good. And that's a great point, because we do have to be mindful how we treat others when we see them in a space.
Yeah.
But we you know, we don't do a really good job of that as humans, as people. We don't do a good job of that because we just have this expectation. I don't know where it comes from that, you know, it can't be more than one thing. Like you couldn't be a great photographer and also be working a side hustle just because somebody paid you. Like that doesn't give somebody the right to look down on you. And I think that people need to understand that, like, just because you pay somebody to do a job or whatever the case may be doesn't mean that when you see them in a different space that you get to look down on them or treat them a certain kind of way. Like, that's nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I mean, we get to going and ripping and running.
Yes.
It's 2019. Again, it's changed both our lives. Yeah. I would say, you know, I just remember those days and trying to figure it out. But this was, you know, for you, this was your first time and last time being a ghostwriter.
Yes.
Because I remember, I'm like, I'm busy. I don't have the time to do this. So I need you to do it. I'll pay you extra.
Yes.
I'll do whatever, but I can't do this. I can't be the one to write this book.
And y'all, I'm like, ain't no way in the world nobody that busy. Like, I'm like, how you can't meet for another month? Like, how in the world are we going to, because me, like, my whole model was in business, this is the timeline, this is the structure, this is how it has to be, and that's it. This is it. You signed up for this, you knew what it was, this is it. But he's like, yeah, I can meet this Tuesday, but then, you know, I got to travel to San Francisco, and I'm back in Atlanta, and I got to go this place, that place, and so it'll be, next month. Huh? Like Scooby-Doo. No. So, but I, you know, of course, you know, once he and I started working together and I'm seeing his calendar, I'm like, oh, you really are. So then I was like, you know what? Let's take a stab at it. Let's take a stab at it. But, you know, anything and everything that I asked him to do leading up until the point where we started having those ghostwriting conversations, he did, y'all, 1,001%. Like, I didn't have to wait before the deadline. He fully devoted himself to telling the story and doing what I asked him to do. So I entertained the idea. Now, again, y'all know me, I'm kicking and screaming because I'm like, I ain't no ghostwriter. I don't know how to, but here we are. And I Won't Starve is one of the pinnacles of my business. It is one of my crown jewels. It is, I am so proud of that work, and not just because I stepped into a different space, but I am so proud of that work. And right behind, and it continues to change people's lives, that story. And I'm honored to even have been chosen in that space, because I know, even you were looking to work with other people to write your book. Now, I don't know if you wanted them to ghostwrite for you.
Yeah, I did. I came into it like that because when I first started thinking about writing a book and everybody was telling me about this, I got busy as I ever been. You know what I'm saying? Like, in those 2 years, it was like a 2-year process. I was just like, look, I don't have time for this. I never wanted to write a book. People kept putting that on my life. Now I can't see myself not. But people kept putting that on my life. You gonna write a book? You gonna write a book? You gonna write a book? And I'm like, whatever. And so once that happened, and when I reached out to some people I knew, and it just didn't ever pan out, I was already done. Like, man, forget this book stuff. But then somebody, we got introduced, and I'm like, okay, cool. And again, I told you the first day, like, I got other things that you can be doing for me. You ain't got to worry about this book stuff. Let's do this. So I'm like, well, if you're going to do that, then fine. I mean, this is, monumental. If I spent the camera around, literally, this is when things start happening. I don't know, that's on my wall right now, working with the NBA, WNBA, stuff like that, the NFL, all this stuff was happening at that time. Amtrak, Save the Children Foundation. Like, I'm traveling. I work with some of the biggest law firms in the Southeast, and like, all that's happening at this time of doing this book. And then we created I Won't Starve, the movement, I Won't Starve, the company. You know what I mean? We're doing these workshops. I don't have time to write nothing. I don't care about nothing. But it's funny when you make time for it, because by that summer, that was in the beginning of the year, but by that summer, we were locked in. And I found myself spending more time on the book because we had to get it done than anything. And it was life-changing for me as well. Of course, becoming an author, but just telling stuff that I wasn't going to tell nobody.
I'm going to tell you, it's a thing. And then, but here's the other part, too, is that I experienced monumental growth as a book coach when we were working on I Won't Starve. Because, one, I had to change my method. I couldn't approach Jay with the same thought that everybody else came with me, because, as he said, he already built a brand. He had already had live events and workshops, and he was already speaking and teaching and training and traveling. He was already doing all of those things. So he wasn't new, fresh out of the gate. Now, new in the book space, sure, but everything else from a brand building perspective, he already had in place. Press kit, speaker one sheet, photos, like all the things I would tell my clients to get. Now, he already came to me with that. So I had to change my approach in order for it to be what it needed to be. And I grew as a writer during that spot, because I couldn't tell the story the same. And I had to embody his voice. I talked about embodying the Ink Pen Diva, but I had to embody his voice, and I had to do an excellent job of telling the story. And, I wasn't alone in that process. And I think that that's what made it beautiful at the end of the day, was the fact that it was a partner, something that you were also willing to commit yourself to. Like you said, we were locked in. And so we definitely, we got that project to the finish line, and oh my gosh, it went nuts. It went nuts.
So, in the middle of doing the book, you was in a space. Things started going on, and you thought that you were out of the woods, household wise. And then here in the middle of the summer is like, here's rearing his ugly head again. It hadn't caught up fast enough.
Right.
What was your thought process?
That I once again found myself like back on the bottom, that, I felt as though I was constantly scraping. You feel like you're constantly scraping just to get to the top, only to be knocked back down every single time you saw some light. And Jay, how they say that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but I swear my light was like another train. My light was another train. Every time I saw that light, it was another train coming and another train coming. And then here come the eviction notices, right? And then here come the days of struggling with food, and all of the things that come along with that another train coming at the end of the tunnel. And But again, I kept trucking, I kept plucking along. And then I was able to, again, pull myself out of it, some way, somehow. And I really just, I have to give, your flowers, because when you saw me in that vulnerable state, you also saw potential. And that potential caused you to spring into action and help me in ways that I had not been helped before. And I'm not talking financially, you guys. So don't think that. I'm talking about him utilizing his gifts and his resources, his talents and his abilities to push me into the spot of where I needed to be. And that helped. That helped because I was able to turn things around, and once again, financially, really show up as the person that I was supposed to be as a business owner. And eventually, once the light at the end of the tunnel actually became light, then I was able to put myself in another apartment in a much better side of town, much nicer. And that was just the start of really, really turning things around.
And I mentioned that because I didn't want to miss that point. And what you said, when you want to help people, and you really truly helping people, like she said, it wasn't just about finances. Right. If you see somebody, you actually, the help should be tailor-made for them.
Correct.
Not the way you want to help them. You know what I'm saying? And I knew that she had a business that can go. She had something that she can do. It was just that, like, it's always these little nagging things that keep you from growing. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody goes through it, no matter what it is. It's like, damn, if I can just get this out of the way, right. You know what I'm saying? I'll be fine. Every month, this comes at the same time, and it's never, right for me. So if I can take this away for 2 months, I'll be fine. If I can get a better opportunity. So we said, okay, you know what? Don't worry about an office space. Here you go. You got one. Don't worry, you already working with me anyway, so you over here. Right. Don't worry about that computer that's not working. Here go a better one, a brand new one. Don't worry about that. Here go this. Here go, like, I'm gonna call this person. I'm gonna talk to this person. We're gonna show this. We're gonna make this happen so that you can be okay. And I wanted to empower her. You know what I'm saying? I wanted her to still do her thing, even though now at this point it's like you're with me. Mm-hmm. But you still have to be the Inkpen Diva. Right. I never bought into get right with Tamika. So no matter what, she's never not been that. She's back in my phone still, like, cover Inkpen Diva to me. Like, but no, because I knew, like, if I helped her to get strong, now I have a strong ally. Yeah. Not just somebody who doing what I say. Do I actually have a strong ally that can run with me? I wanted somebody to run with me, not somebody to run when I say run. That's what that was. And so, once we got through this book, I know my life changed, but this is about you. Right. Where did the business go once you were done with I Won't Starve?
I'm emotional over here just thinking about that time because the whole trajectory of my company changed. I was a completely different person by the end of us working on that project. My life was starting to turn around personally. I was finally able to charge what I was worth at the time versus really selling myself short, which is what I have been doing because I was trying to survive and just trying to make it day by day. And so when I think about it now and I look back on it, and it's so crazy that we're doing this interview now, so many years later, where I've gone through like a personal evolution and time of growth, I just can't help but to fight back tears because I just realized what life was like for me back then and where it is today. So I'm just so grateful. But business changed. And I think we were at a networking event or dinner or something one night. I think it was a networking event. And I was sitting next to a gentleman who had been thinking about writing a book, and he was like, "Oh, that's all?" And me hearing that out loud from somebody else was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this can never be this way again.
Yesterday's price.
But
I told you from the door. You know what I mean?
You did.
But it's like, we had to go through other metamorphoses. Yeah. So I think it took away from that. But I remember that day when he was like, he said, that's not a lot. I'm like, no, I told you it's not a lot. And then, and funny thing, you had actually went up. from that
did.
thing.
I did.
And that still
Yeah,
wasn't
I
a lot.
did.
So,
It
you
still
know,
wasn't a
look,
lot,
the
yeah.
price is completely different today. I'm going to let you know right now. So you gotta make it move.
It's different now.
But look, this is a S.T.A.R.V.E. talk special, right? So which means this is going to be a two-parter. So we're going to end this right here because this is coming up on her 1-year anniversary of Ink Pen Diva, The Truth Behind My Pen. And so this is the change of start of both of our different lives, you know. But we're going to get into now, no more I'm getting put out my house, no more none of that stuff in the life. We're going to start talking about in the second half of this about that stuff, the come up, the real come up, the real grind, the real how you got to where from that point to now where you are. So listen, if you've been on here, you've been watching us, look, next week, the next one will be here too. In the meantime, in between time, subscribe to the YouTube page at S.T.A.R.V.E. Talk. Go YouTube at S.T.A.R.V.E. Talk. Subscribe to the page. Go to inkpendiva.com and get her book. Go to jhalim.com. You want to see me. IWon'tStarve.com is where all this stuff is housed at. I know it's a lot. I am J Halim on all my YouTube, all my platforms, social media platforms. I'm kind of going crazy. Tamika, give me your platform.
So I am at Ink Pen Diva on Instagram and Tamika L Sims if you want to connect with me personally.
So part 2, y'all, get prepared for part 2. I'm telling you, we're going to talk about this, but this is going into, because September 1st,
Woohoo!
2023, it'll be 1 year, and this is a celebration, y'all. We are celebrating the Ink Pen Diva herself. We're going to talk about this thing. Well, until then, we'll get back with you on the next one.
I'm in the studio with J Halim.
And I'm in the studio with J Halim.
I am in the studio with J Halim.
I am in the studio with J Halim. I'm in the studio with J Halim.
You are now in the studio with J Halim.